Thank you very much for this invitation. It's a pleasure to speak also to here to you in this, for me, new environment of this group of people brought together surrounding the topic of Bildung. I very much enjoyed the previous speakers also. I'm a teacher, so the story of Josefa rings familiar. I work at a council for the Dutch government where I've written a report advising on AI. So lots of things Kim said also really inspired me. However, I will do something quite different because by training, I'm a philosopher. And the connection here made between AI, education, but also Bildung, led me to bring something of a philosophical speculation to the table here. Bear with me, it will be possibly we will be quite abstract or a bit of historical, but it was the topic inspired it, and I hope it's interesting for you to listen. As a philosopher, I have an interest in Bildung, more in particular. I've done a lot of research into the philosophical current of humanism, which I think is very strongly linked with the idea of Bildung. And what I would like to argue in these next few minutes is that both concepts of Bildung and humanism are strongly linked with a certain way of thinking about the influence of books on human beings, and that we can actually distinguish two different relations or two different forms here. Interestingly, it kind of rings familiar to the distinction Lenne made in the beginning of two types of knowledge. And I will discuss both and argue that those different views of Bildung and humanism have an impact on how we use AI now, or how we should think about it, at least. So let me first say something of what I believe to be one of the strong currents within the thinking about Bildung and humanism. And that's a current that is strongly linked to the philosophy of the Enlightenment. It was in the 18th century that Immanuel Kant wrote that enlightenment is humanity's liberation from its self-imposed inability to speak. And as an answer, he said, dare to think. That is really liberating humanity from religion and disbelief, finding a way of thinking for ourselves, inward Bildung, the very key concept of the Enlightenment. What does this have to do with books? I would say here, the Enlightenment sees humanism and Bildung as the project of reading the book of nature, as seeing nature as something that's written in a universal language. Often you could say that this is seen as the language of mathematics or of physics. And it's the task of humanity to try to uncover that deep secret language that holds for all of nature, to wrestle the secrets and the laws of nature from it. As Leibniz would call this, he was looking for a mathesis universalis, a universal mathematics to read the book of nature. And you can actually see already from here a line moving all the way up towards thinking computationally and the rise of artificial intelligence 2 centuries later. I would argue within this certain conception of Bildung and humanism, this one, there is a specific vision of what Bildung and humanism is about. And that vision is a vision of control. As another thinker of this era called it, René Descartes, he said his dream was to become maître et possesseur de la nature, a master and possessor of nature. That is really what it's all about, and what our thinking and our Bildung and our humanism should be geared towards. It's a vision of Bildung of making humanity strong, and in that way controlling the world, our nature, nature around us, our bodies, our societies, with rational knowledge. Skipping a bit further, this very specific interpretation of humanism and of Bildung, you could say, became the center of debates in the 20th century again, as philosophers debated the horrors that happened in the 20th century. In particular, about humanism, there was this debate between Sartre and Martin Heidegger. Sartre actually saw this form of humanism as the answer still to the horrors of the 20th century. In his work, L'existentialisme et un humanisme, existentialism is a humanism. He argued the reasons we had all these horrors and wars is because we did not think for ourselves. That we did not, instead we understood ourselves as things, and those things were commanded by armies and dictators, and that brought us all these horrors. That was his view, trying to save that classical view of humanism. But it was Martin Heidegger who said, at the contrary, it's actually this form of humanism that we can trace back all the way to Kant, that's actually the cause of all our problems. What he said, this type of humanism put humanity in the center of existence. And through this vision of control, enslaved nature, society, and everything around us to this over-controlling idea of human power. And that destructive relationship led to all the horrors of the 20th century, which he wrote in his letter on humanism, Brief über das Humanismus. What does this have to do with AI? I think we can see a this thinking about humanism and its dark side strongly linked with a vision that we currently have about AI. Here also, there's a very strong idea of AI as something, as a tool for us to make us stronger. Or as Yuval Harari says, to make Homo Deus, to make us godly beings. AI as a kind of ultimate tool with which we can control our environment, make better decisions, make everything more efficient, understand much more patterns, and in all ways increase our control over ourselves and our environment. Which currently in the field of AI is even leading towards some kind of fear that we've created such a powerful tool that it might actually be more powerful than ourselves. And it might turn against us and make us superfluous. And this is something, in particular in the field of education, we are experiencing now with the question, what do we actually have to learn? What can we learn, students? Is there actually something to learn still? And what ways can we find ways to compete with the machine, or to make sure that students don't use the machine only? Now, the answer of Martin Heidegger to this dilemma was that we should abandon humanism altogether, Bildung altogether. We should actually go back to more something of like a religious view of the world, which I think is not really plausible. And that's the second point I'd like to make in the last few minutes. I do believe that this is only one very specific interpretation of humanism and Bildung. And I believe that there's another, an older one, which actually is more relevant for us, and that could actually provide us with much more interesting ideas also with how to think in a different way about what AI might mean. This is a tradition of humanism and Bildung that's not about control and power, but it's actually about humility. It's a humanism that doesn't have the name human in it because the human is in the center of the universe, but because it believes in the idea that being human, means knowing our fragility. And becoming more humane is understanding the fragility and the difference that constitutes our human being. I think this is the oldest tradition in humanism. It dates back to Cicero and Seneca, who said the book civilizes. They brought the book in against the amphitheater in the Roman Empire. Instead of power and control, the book brings us inward, makes us more human, because it actually places us less in the center of existence. It's the same line that goes later on to people like Erasmus and Montaigne. We'll use it also as a form of moderation. Also, here people are thinking about humanism and Bildung related to the book, but it's not the book of nature with a universal language. It's the book of interpretation, of hermeneutics, of the humaniora, of the human sciences that do not want to understand some kind of universal language, but actually more understand the diversity of what it means to be human. It's the humanism of people like Erich Auerbach, who wrote about literature. It's the humanism that Edward Said propagated in the 20th century in creating dialogue between different cultures, and Peter Sloterdijk most recently also in our relationship towards science. Now, I'm ending off. What does this all mean for AI? I do think much of our thinking about AI is in the line of that first enlightenment form of thinking about what it is to be human. And it might be interesting to think outside of that paradigm of control. That we can think outside of the paradigm of creating more efficiency, about thinking about output, and education also being about getting towards the right answers, and actually finding inspiration in that other line of thinking about humanism and Bildung that actually emphasizes other aspects. Instead of reaching that post-human outcome that makes us superfluous of the Enlightenment, we might actually see if we can go back to that older tradition in which AI can be a tool that actually makes us more humane. Thinking about a different design of the way AI is used in classrooms, instead of focusing on knowing what the answer is, designing systems more that they are that they work for, so that students are learning to listen, so that they deliberately actually have to take more time and deliberately have to deal with conflicting perspectives. Instead of seeing education as something as going towards the right answer, some kind of universal truth, it should focus more on stimulating the dialogue part in the classroom. Instead of saying that it's all about reaching certainty and finding the right answer and grading it in the right way, it should be about stimulating doubt. Focusing essays not on finding the right argument or the right answer at the end of an argument, but making things more complicated and asking our students actually to write essay about that, making things more complicated. Yeah, in the end, also even have creating an attitude that does not lead us to the laziness of getting all the answers quickly because ChatGPT gave them to us, but actually designing the system in that way that it increases our wonders, our sense of wonder about things that we can explore. Anyway, I hope you've bear with me this kind of more reflective philosophical exploration. I've hoped I tried to do in my own way to connect Bildung with a tradition of thinking about humanism in the history of philosophy, one that leads us towards thinking of Bildung and humanism as trying to uncover the book of nature. And that, I think, really brings us to this destructive form of AI that's all about control and efficiency. But I think we can draw more inspiration from a second strand that focuses more on humility, seeing the book as not something that has definite answers, but as something that we always need to try to interpret over and over again. And that way it makes us more humble and more humane. And I hope that might also give us ideas of how to program and develop, use AI education in a different way.